In this video, we're going to explore Bohr diagrams. Bohr diagrams are yet another way that, another pattern that is shown in the periodic table in the way that it's organized. So in order to understand the pattern, we first have to understand how to make the diagrams. Before we do that, there are a few keys that you have to remember. So remember that the atomic number equals the number of protons in an atom. So protons, okay? You also have to understand that the atomic mass minus the atomic number equals the number of neutrons. So electrons, where do those come into play? Well, this one's a little bit easier. So the number of electrons you can find by looking at the number of protons. Okay. Knowing the number of electrons is really important. You need to know them in order to make Bohr diagrams. So if you know the number of protons, you will know the number of electrons. So what are Bohr diagrams? Well, Bohr diagrams are used to show what an atom of an element would look like and how the electrons are arranged in these elements. So when we looked at the Bohr model, or you will look at the Bohr model, pardon me, of the atom, what the Bohr model suggests is that electrons are arranged in clouds or levels or orbitals around the nucleus. So in this case, the P here is the nucleus, which is phosphorus, and each orbital, or each ring around the P, the nucleus, pardon me, can only hold so many electrons. So the first orbital, or the one that's closest to the nucleus, can only hold 2. So first equals 2 electrons, and I'm going to make electrons E minus because that is a negative charge. So the second orbital can hold 8 electrons. Whoops. Try this again. 8 electrons. And when we draw them electrons, you're going to draw them in pairs if there's more than 2. Yeah. Come on now. Alright. So the second level, there are 8 electrons. Okay. The third orbital, again, there are going to be 8. You can fit 8 electrons in there. Again, you do them in pairs. Okay, so there is the third one. And you can only do 8 electrons. Alright, so after doing this, I realized that I had made a mistake. So instead of phosphorus, I'm going to erase this, and I am going to put Ar, or argon, in there, and I will explain why as we learn how to create Bohr diagrams. So in this case, this argon would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 electrons. because all of the spaces in those 3 orbitals are filled up. So that's 18 electrons, which would hopefully make sense because argon has an atomic number of 18, which means 18 protons. Protons equal electrons, and that is 18. If you happen to have a third layer, or a fourth layer, or a fourth orbital, in that fourth orbital, what the number that can be held there, fourth one, is 18 electrons. So in the outermost fourth orbital, or 18 electrons can be held in there. Okay, so now how do we draw Bohr diagrams? So the first thing you need to do is you need to write the symbol in the middle. Okay, so our symbol, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an example of oxygen. So O is the atomic symbol for oxygen. Okay, so the second thing you're going to do is you're going to find the number of electrons. So remember, the number of electrons equals the number of protons, and the number of protons can be found by looking at the atomic number. Okay. So when I look at my periodic table, and I look for the number of electrons of oxygen, I would see that the atomic number of oxygen is 8. So that means there are 8 electrons. So the third step. So we're going to say 8. Third step. Now I need to draw the electrons and the orbitals. So what you need to do first is you have to start with the first orbital and you have to fill it up. Remember, the first orbital can only have 2 electrons. So I'm just saying draw and fill orbitals. Okay, so we have 1 electron, 2 electrons. Remember, if they're more than 2, you should draw them in pairs, just so then it looks neater and it's easier to see where the electrons are. So we have that first orbital filled because it can only fill 2. The second orbital can fill 8, but I don't have to fill all those spaces because I already have 2 here. So I would end up with 6. So we're going to count up from 2 to 8, and that's where we'll stop. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what happens is, there's my Bohr diagram. It shows that there are 8 electrons within the oxygen, excuse me, the oxygen atom. So there is how I draw my Bohr diagram. Okay, so now that I've shown you the right way of drawing a Bohr diagram, I'm going to show you some of the mistakes that people make when drawing Bohr diagrams. So here is one that's a mistake. Oh, come on. 2, 4, 6, come on. 6, 8. And that one is absolutely wrong because we can only fit 2 electrons in that first orbital. So let's see another example of what's wrong, how they can be done wrong. Okay, so we have the first orbital correct, but then people might only put 2 in here and then do a third orbital. It's 6, 7, 8. So that one is wrong because, again, you didn't fill up the orbitals before moving to the next one. Filled up the first orbital, but the second orbital I did not. There's another error that people might make, is starting from the outer orbital and moving in. So they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, starting from the outer orbital, moving in. That is incorrect. You need to start from the inside and move out. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to go to your handout, and it'll have the first 18 elements of the periodic table. And what you're going to do is you're going to draw the orbitals, and you're going to look at the pattern and see there'll be a pattern developing within the periods and within the groups. So see if you can figure out the the Bohr models, practice making Bohr diagrams, and then figure out what the pattern is.